We're going to look at working with simple interest accounts and putting them together, working problems. Simple interest, the formula is I equals PRT. I stands for the interest earned. P is your principal investment. How much money did you put in the account initially? R is the interest rate, usually given as a percent. But when you work with it in the equation, you usually convert it to a decimal. And T is time in years. That's the standard simple interest rate formula. We're going to actually look at annual simple interest rate, in which case the time is going to be 1 year. So if you substitute 1 into the formula, the equation gets a little simpler. I equals PR. This actually should look kind of familiar to us because we've already seen this formula before. This is just the percent formula, where the principal is your base, the interest rate is your percent, and the interest earned is the value you're calculating. So if you know the percent formula, then you know this annual simple interest rate. Same exact thing. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to put together two simple interest rates accounts. We might have 3 in some cases, but most of them are going to deal with 2. The general idea is you're going to take the interest from the first account, add it to the interest of the second account, and that'll give you the total amount of interest. Now, we're not going to usually deal with interest for each account directly. Instead, what we'll say is, let's do the principal of the first account times its rate, and we'll do the principal for the second account times its rate, and that'll equal the total interest. In rare problems, we might do something like know something about the total amount invested and the total overall rate we were looking for. One thing you might keep in mind is for the total rate, it is not rate 1 plus rate 2. It is actually a weighted average, and it falls in between the two rates. So if you have one account that does 9% interest, you have another account that gives 5% interest, then that total rate would be somewhere between 5 and 9, and it would be closer to the one that you invest more money in. And there can be also other types of setups. You might have interest 1 equals interest 2. Those are a little bit more rare types of problems, but they can happen. So the same general idea, principal 1, rate 1 equals principal 2, rate 2. But most of the time it's going to be interest 1 plus interest 2 equals total interest. So let's look at some example problems. So Jan made a deposit into a 7% simple interest account. She made another deposit $1,500 less than the first one in a certificate of deposit earning 9% annual simple interest. The total interest earned on both investments for 1 year was $505. How much money was deposited in the certificate of deposit? So there's a lot of things we don't know, and what we're going to do is we're going to define some variables. We're going to call X is the principal of the 7% account. That's how much money we put in there. And then we want to talk about how much money we put in the certificate of deposit. Now what we could call it a different letter, Y. We don't want to call it X also, because that would indicate both are the same amount. We can't make that assumption. In fact, we know that's not the case, because we're told that the second account has $1,500 less than the first. You could use a different letter, Y, but then we would have to work with 2 letters. We're not ready to talk about it in that fashion yet. So what we're going to do instead is define the second amount in terms of the first one. And we're going to say X minus 1,500, because it's 1,500 less than the first, is going to be how much money we put into the certificate of deposit, the 9% account. So X is how much money we're starting with in the first account. 1,500 less than that, so X minus 1,500, is how much money is in the second account. And so we also know how much total interest we're going to earn, $505. So we're looking at interest of the first account plus interest of the second account equals the total interest, which means to calculate the interest of the first account, you take its principal times its rate, and to find the interest of the second account, you take its principal times its rate. Now again, we don't necessarily need to know those numbers, but we're going to set it up in that fashion. So the principal of the first account is X. Its rate is 7%, so x times 0.07. The principal of the second account is x minus 1500, whatever that is, times its rate at 9%, 0.09. And the total interest earned is 505. Now we're just going to work this problem out. So 0.07 times x is 0.07x. We're going to take that 0.09 and distribute it. It's called right-hand distribution if it's coming in from the right hand. And that times x, and then that times 1500, and we get this. 0.07x plus 0.09x minus 135 equals 505. Simplifying the left-hand side of the equation, notice those two x terms are just adding, so we're just going to add them together. Get 1600ths x minus 135 equals 505. And now we're just going to solve this equation like we have in the past. We're going to get rid of the constant, so we're going to add 135 to both sides. Then we're going to get rid of the coefficient, so divide both sides by 0.16. And put that in our calculator, and we find out x is 4,000. That's how much money is in the principal for the 7% account. But the question is, how much money did we deposit in the certificate of deposit, which is the 9%? So we know that's 1,500 less, so substituting 4,000 in there, 4,000 minus 1,500 is 2,500, and that's our solution. Make sure you actually answer the question they're asking, not necessarily getting x. X might get you to that answer, and x might be the answer, but you have to make sure you actually answer the question they asked us. Let's look at another problem. May has made an investment of $3,600 at an annual simple interest rate of 9%. How much money does she have to invest at an annual simple interest rate of 6% if the total interest earned is 7.8% of the total investment? So this is a little bit different. This is a slightly unusual type problem because we know all the interests involved. We know the rate of the first account, rate of the second account, and we know the total rate. And notice that's somewhere in between 9 and 6, which is what we said should happen. So let's define some things. We know how much money is in the first account. They told us $3,600. We don't know how much money is in the second account, so we're going to call that x. We also, since we don't know the total interest earned, but we know it's 7.8% of the total investment, so we need to say, how can we describe the total investment? Well, we know we've already put in $3,600 into an account, and we're putting in X dollars more, so the total must be the total of 3,600 and X. So X plus 3,600 is our total investment. Now we're going to find our equation. So again, interest 1 plus interest 2 equals total interest. In this case, we're going to substitute all of those with our respective P and R's. So P1, R1, P2, R2, and P total, R total. And we're going to fill in the things we know. So we know the principal of the first one is 3,600. We know its rate is 9%. We called the principal of the second one X. Its rate is 6%. And we said the total principal was X plus 3,600. And its rate was 0.078 or 7.8%. And now we're just going to start multiplying and distributing things together. And so again, take that 0.078, distribute it to the x and the 3,600, multiply everybody else, and we get an equation that looks like this. 324 plus 0.06x equals 0.078x plus 280.8. And now we got x's on both sides of our equation, so let's get rid of one of those. I'm going to subtract 0.06x from both sides, getting 324 equals 0.018x plus 280.8. Now we're going to isolate the x. So get rid of the constant value that's on its side of the equation, the 280.8. And then get rid of the coefficient. So divide both sides by 0.018. And we get x is 2,400. And we're asked how much did she invest at an annual simple interest rate of 6%. That's the second account. That's this number. So there's the solution. So they didn't ask how much total invested. That would have been, what, 6,000? So, but they didn't ask us for that. So you don't have to necessarily find it. If you found it, that would be fine. But we wanted to know this 2,400 value. Alright, let's look at this third problem. Mohammed, a financial planner, recommended that 40% of a client's cash account be invested in preferred stock earning 9% annual simple interest. The remainder of the client's cash was placed in treasury bonds earning 7% annual simple interest. The total annual interest earned from the two accounts was $2,496. Find the total amount invested. So we don't know how much we invested all overall. I'm going to call that X. How much did we put in the first account? Well, he said we should put 40% of our available cash. So 40% of the total amount invested we would write as 0.40x. Again, that's that percentage formula, percent times base. So the base is how much money did are we investing. How much money did we put into the 7% account? Well, we were supposed to put the remainder of it. Well, we've already used up 40%, so the remainder must be 60%. So this has percentages and percentages. These are the portions of the amount invested, and then there's the interest rates. So now we're going to write our equation. Interest 1 plus interest 2 equals total interest. Again, principal 1 times rate 1, principal 2 times rate 2, that should equal the total interest. It told us the total interest. So we're going to start filling things in. So how much money we put in the first account is 40% of the total times the rate of the account, which is 9%. So 40.40x times 0.09. We put 60% of the total in the second account, 0.60x, times its account rate, which is 7%, equals the total amount invested. And now we're just going to clean this left-hand side up. We're going to multiply those decimal values together, add those results. 0.078x equals 2496, and now we just have to isolate x. So get rid of the coefficient, divide both sides by 0.078, and that gives us 32,000. And remember, x was the total amount invested, and find the total amount invested. There we go. There's the answer. So there are some examples of how you're going to work with mixing accounts, dealing with interest problems, simple